This is episode number 210, and I still have more to talk about 2003. My name is Phil, and you're listening to The Lip. Yes, I'm still at it, folks. This is me continuing my story of 2002 slash 2003. At this point in time, I have given you quite a few episodes on the subject, very near and dear to my heart. These really specific times in my life. It seems like I've been, like I said, multiple times throughout the last 2, 4, 5, 6 weeks. I have been telling this story of 2002 and 2003 in very small bites, little chunks here and there to different people, depending on whether or not some pertinent subject came about that seemed like it was relevant for me to discuss some aspect of my 2003 or 2002. But the last 6 weeks, counting this one, I have been telling most of the story. Enough to create a nice continuity throughout the entire 2002 2003. Real simply put, still a few things that I have yet to get to, and not to sound totally mysterious, even though I did just pull myself away from the blacklist that I've been binge watching for the last couple of days, weeks now. I'm in season 3. There are some parts of my story that I'm not going to reveal. But trust me, the stuff that I've given you is really good. And like I said earlier, I can't remember which episode it's been because there have been so many lately about this general subject that I may be using another format in order to add a few more details that I haven't quite put into the story yet. And that's on its way too. But trust me, it's probably farther off in the distance than I can think of in order to get that last format together. So we have what we have, which is going to be the audio version of this story. I think that it's a fun story because, well, thinking back to all the things that happened throughout the entire time, it's really kind of interesting because there was so much uncertainty, so many things that I just couldn't possibly have imagined to have happened. And my favorite thing to say about this whole thing, I'll say it again, decisions that were made in 2002 definitely had an effect on what happened in 2003. I can't stress that enough. But to the point, to get us to where we're going, to finish another portion, if not, I don't know how much further we're going to be able to get because, like I said, this is a much bigger story than I even thought it was going to be, and I don't want to leave out too much. But at the same time, I definitely want to leave some for the imagination. Right? Got to give you something to sink your teeth in, and I got to give you something to make you think. Is there more? That's kind of the plan here. But by the time I'm finished, you will have had a vast majority of my life in 2002 and 2003, from January of 2002 till December of 2003. And that's pretty much what I wanted to show you. And here we go. We're going to move forward. And I think the next thing you're going to hear is going to be the fill in the blanks. Yes, in fact, it will be fill in the blanks. Question that has a blank that needs to be filled in Am I ever going to talk about anything else for the rest of the time that I'm doing this show? The answer is absolutely yes. I have plenty of other material that I've been working on in the process of these last several weeks where I've been doing 2002, 2003. I just need you all to be patient with me because this is sort of a passion project beyond everything else that I'm doing. I need to get this out. I need to have everybody hear what happened to me in what was a very crazy and uncertain period of time in my life. I got to admit, most people, when they're 24 years old, they have a much better experience. And my goodness, when you're 25, the last thing you expect is to be celebrating your birthday in a hospital room, surrounded by a team, not just but a team of doctors trying to figure out what's wrong with you. We'll talk more about that when we do the recap of the episode, but the question for the fill in the blanks is, am I going to be doing any other types of episodes? The answer is absolutely yes. And to be more specific, I have 7 weeks worth of material that I'm going to go into after this. I've got more just talking, fact or fiction, story episodes, and I'll even break a specific episode that I'm going to do going back to how I got back into shape. And in fact, how I got into the best shape of my life to become a corrections officer. So there is going to be more to come. That's definitely going to be fill in the blanks. And now I'm going to ring the bell and we're going to start the main event. Bell has rung. There's no doubt about it. This is the main event for this episode, number 210. My goodness. Second episode as we're rolling through the 4th year after the 4th year anniversary. My goodness, I have so many things that I can't wait to get to on this portion of the episode. But let's start with a slight recap. The last 2 weeks, I was talking to you about my stay in the hospital. Yeah, I took 2 weeks. Excuse me. It's a little late as I'm recording on this May 17th, even though this episode's not going to come out until May 31st. But, that's what I've been doing this last several weeks. I've been recording episodes very, very early in the process. However, this one is certainly beginning to close the gap. But that's neither here nor there. We're doing the recap. Last week, I talked about how and why I was in the hospital. I already disclosed that I had a horrible condition known as pancreatitis, and it was brought on by something that the doctors couldn't explain, but I didn't understand why, and that was I had taken a lot of Aleve, about a bottle and a half of Aleve every week for probably 2 months, 3 months. And that definitely led to the pancreatitis. Now, the other issue that I had, the real thing, the thing that led me to take all that Aleve was that I had ankle swelling and pain in my ankles, which was a symptom of the real culprit, which was sarcoidosis. I believe I explained that it's a disease that the doctors don't really know how you get it, and there's several levels to it, and it can affect multiple organs, skin, lungs, eyes, heart. Mine was in the lungs, and it was at a moderate level, enough to knock me out. My massive symptoms were the fact that I had a cough, which, if you remember back several episodes, where I was telling you when I was at Wawa, customers were wondering about how much I smoked, which I never have in my entire life. Then I had tremendous weakness. I was able to push around 96 gallons of milk. And then I got to a point where I had literally no physical strength. I could barely get out of my own way. I could maybe lift up a couple of gallons of milk at a time. I was not strong. The thing sucked my actual physical strength from me. And then I would like to say the worst side effect or symptom of the sarcoidosis for me is the one that pretty much generated a whole mentality that I'll probably get around to talking about through this episode, and that is fatigue. Massive, massive fatigue. Just unspeakable levels of fatigue where I would be sitting in a place for hours and just not physically have the desire or ability to get up. And I mean, it was bad to the point where I would literally be sitting on the couch in the living room wanting to watch TV, and I physically wouldn't have the energy to actually pick up the remote and turn it on. It's that bad. Without the explanation of just how bad the fatigue really was, I can tell you that was the worst thing of all. The fatigue. It was terrible. I think I told you about my birthday gift of an enema, literally on my birthday, and up until, I don't know, 8 years ago, I still had that box from the enema from 2003, empty box, because it was a reminder of the one thing I got on my birthday that was wrapped up, an enema of all things, right? And it was that day that I swore to myself I would never be in a position where I would not do what I wanted to do on my birthday. That's how it was. I didn't care. It was going to be that way. And up until 2018, I believe it was, I kept that promise, and that was the only day, my birthday in 2018, that I actually went to work as opposed to doing what I wanted on my birthday. And that was the only hiccup, and it never, ever happened again. I think that is pretty much a fair assessment and a good recap of the last week or two. Now I'm picking it up on May 9th, 2003, specific day, because I went home on May 8th, and it was a weird situation because I went upstairs to my room and I was just exhausted because you would think if you're in the hospital and you get to rest all day, you don't have to worry about anything. You wouldn't be so tired. But first and foremost, I was totally exhausted because the one thing that you don't get in the hospital is rest. You don't. You just don't, because they're checking, at least for me, they check my blood pressure, my temperature, and my oxygen like every 4 hours. So if I happened to have fallen asleep somewhere along the way, it wasn't going to be long before they came and woke me up, took my temperature, took my blood pressure, checked my oxygen, and or the the fluids that were pumping to me for the first several, I guess, 4 days because I was so dehydrated. They had to keep changing it, and that would make a loud beep every time that the bag got empty. So there was no rest for the weary, as I say, and the fatigue was already still hitting me. That had not limited itself to a point where I could really feel good about myself. And let me tell you how, as I was at home for the first time on the 8th, I had an extremely uncomfortable situation because I don't know, it was more mental or physical. Most likely it was mental because the doctor that had given me that lung biopsy told me I wasn't going to remember any of it. I had a very, very, very difficult time sleeping on my stomach. And here's a funny story. When I was younger, I wrestled, and I wrestled so much that I had a weird tick that my cousin found when I slept over his house one day. He woke up to go run to the bathroom and discovered that he was walking past me, and I was fighting myself from laying down on my back. Just the thing that wrestlers just we don't want to be on our back. You get on your back, you're pinned. Match is over. And subconsciously, I was fighting to keep off of my back. So when I had to go to sleep after I got home and I tried to sleep on my stomach, it was just weird because I didn't want to lay on my chest for some reason because it just felt like I could feel the instruments that the doctor was using in order to do the lung biopsy. I just felt like I could still feel them going down my chest and into my lung. And I just started sleeping on my side, and it was weird because I was fighting myself from rolling over to my back, and I was really didn't want to roll over on my chest. It was just a really weird time. I just was horribly uncomfortable, and that lasted for a couple of years up until about 2005, I think it was. Yeah, and that only happened to change, I guess, after I broke my ankle. It just, I don't know, I had something else to think about, maybe. I don't know. Weird how that works, isn't it? But that was terrible, and it lasted for, like I said, about 2 years. And during that time, I just kept fighting myself and not trying to sleep on my back or my chest. It was weird. But to go back to the days after I was out of the hospital, May 9th, I just sort of sat back and was just worn out. Because, like I said, you just don't get any sleep in the hospital. And because I was so worn out, because I was so tired, it just seemed like time just stood still. Now, one of the things that I had to do was I had to go see the gastro doctor, and I had to go see the what was he? The pulmonary specialist, the guy who was dealing with the lungs, and then finally I had to go see my general doctor as well. And I had made a couple appointments. Now, during this time, the general doctor and the lung doctor, no sense in giving people fake names if I don't actually use the fake names. Dr. Kaiser was the pulmonary doctor, and Dr. Booth was my general practitioner, and the gastro doctor was Dr. White. Each of them had scheduled me an appointment within a couple days of me getting out of the hospital, starting with Dr. Booth, my general practitioner, and I spoke to him, and he conveyed about how the testing for sarcoidosis, excuse me, was pretty much full on, and they didn't really know if the symptoms were going to be gone quickly or if they were going to go away at all. It's just the nature of the disease. You could have it and it could affect you terribly, or it could just disappear. It's the nature of the disease. And so they wanted to sort of see what was going on with me and sort of monitor me for a while. So he told me that he was going to keep me out of work for a fairly extended period of time, the rest of the month of May. So I wasn't going to go back until about June 1st, give or take, or somewhere within the first week of June, depending on how my other appointments went. And so the first one I had was with Dr. White, the gastro doctor, to check out the pancreatitis situation. I went and I saw him. We had a good conversation. Now I'm actually in his office this time as opposed to the hospital, so it was a little bit more. How can I put it? Intimate's not the right word. I guess it would be. Uh, well, maybe it was. I don't know. We talked for probably the first time we saw each other. It was maybe, like I said, it was maybe 10 to 15 minutes, and that was the end of the appointment. I was probably in his office for maybe closer to 20 minutes, 25 minutes. And anybody who's had a doctor's appointment knows that's a pretty lengthy period of time. And the one thing that we were consistently speaking about was that I told him I didn't drink and I didn't do any drugs that I was paying attention to. See how I did that? I didn't know that the Aleve was going to be a problem, and I never really put two and two together, and neither did he. But he was convinced that my blood work was good and that I wasn't having the pain anymore. Surprise, surprise! I was pumped full of fluids, and the 2 months, yes, February, March, April, 3 months of taking a leave had pretty much run its course after being in the hospital for that 8 days, and I was clean from that Aleve. So I hadn't thrown up since I stopped taking it, and I just hadn't taken it any further because during that time my ankle swelling had died down and the pain in my ankles was gone. So I had no need or reason to take the Aleve, and so we sort of left it as a curiosity and sort of said, "Well, you had it. Pancreatitis was killing you, and then all of a sudden, it's gone. We're not going to worry about why it's gone. We're just going to worry about that it is gone. We're going to keep you on file. If you feel ill, give me a call." And on that, I then said, "Thank you, Dr. White, for all that you've done." And that was sometime around, I don't know, May 12th. And I can say that I've never seen the man again. And like I said, and I keep repeating, after the years went by and actually figured out that that's what was actually causing the pancreatitis, I just felt stupid. Did it to myself. Now back to the sarcoidosis. I saw Dr. Kaiser sometime, I saw him once a week after I got out. Like I saw him in the hospital, then I saw him that next week. It was probably around the 11th or the 13th. It was real close to the same time that I had seen Dr. White. And he wanted me to go through some more tests. And so I did another CAT scan. Things were looking just the way they were. He already did the dissection of the biopsy, so he knew that there was sarcoidosis in there, and he just wanted to keep me monitored. And between him and going back to Dr. Booth, the two of them decided that one of the best ways to treat it was to give me prednisone, which is a steroid. And typically speaking, when people are taking a steroid of any type of strength for any type of autoimmune disease or any disease like that, you usually gain weight. Now, I'm projecting into the future just a little bit because they put me on the prednisone pills. I can't even remember what the dosage was, but the weirdest thing happened. I never really gained any weight. Never really gained any weight. Now I was down to 180 ish, 180. Can't remember what it was exactly. I had said it in a previous episode, but I was down really low from like 240 to 180 and change. It was like really light. And I got up to about 190 to 195. And I pretty much lived there for the entirety of 2003 and 4. But the fact that I was on the prednisone for a long time, it seemed like that was going to be the course of action for a while. Turns out that um, during those times and during those tests, like I said, during the month of May, I saw Dr. Kaiser once a week, and I would see Dr. Booth every 2 weeks until a point came where it was like, okay, we feel that we have this thing under control, which of course really seemed like maybe they did. And I was permitted to go back to work the first week of June. So I was out the entire month of May. First week of June comes, and I'm still a little bit on the fatigue side. My strength is not quite there, but I knew that I had to try to do something to stimulate myself, give myself energy again. And what I did was I started doing crunches. Yeah, started doing crunches. And I said, what the heck? Might as well do something which will be able to help the core muscles, and it gives me a bit of an endurance factor by doing a multitude of crunches. Now, I started those crunches probably after seeing Dr. Kaiser. How long? It was probably after the second visit because I knew that I had to try to do something. I had to stimulate myself some way. And that first time I did them, I did like 6, and that was it. I had no more energy for the rest of that day. Then I did about 10. Took me about 3 days to get to 10. And now I'm starting to feel like I'm getting some sort of progress. And I'm like, all right, this is what I got to do. I got to just keep moving because if I stop moving, I'll know that this thing is kicking my butt again. Sarcoidosis is re-attacking me and winning. So I needed to continue to do these crunches. And so I would do the crunches, and in the process, I got to 20 in a day. That took me most of the month to be able to do 20 crunches in one sitting. Now, at this point, we're talking about towards the end of May, like the last week of May. I'm now still feeling like I'm doing better. And I'm thinking, all right, maybe a month is good enough, and I'll go back to work and I'll see how that plays out. And here we are in the month of June. How about that? I finished the month of May because that's really all it came down to. June came around and I go back to work. Now, my first couple of days, I'm a little sluggish, not 100%, and I still keep seeing Dr. Kaiser and my other doctor. I see him, Dr. Booth, every 2 weeks. Then, as I'm talking to Dr. Kaiser, in my mind, I'm thinking to myself, I, I can't tell you exactly what he was thinking, but I can tell you what I thought he was thinking. He seemed to me to be the guy who thought that he could figure out how I got it, sarcoidosis that is, and how to cure it. Not necessarily treat it, but it seemed as if he looked at me as almost a test subject that he was going to write a book about and how he single handedly solved the puzzle that is sarcoidosis because he wanted to see me every single week. Now, specialists typically don't do that, but Dr. Kaiser chose to do so. Now, again, this is another reason why I gave everybody a an assumed name because I'm not throwing anybody under the bus. I needed the name so that it makes sense as I'm telling it, not to just say doctor who was a pulmonator. I'd rather just say Dr. Kaiser. It just felt to me as if Dr. Kaiser was trying to write a book. Just felt like that. Felt like he was going to be the guy who was going to solve the riddle of sarcoidosis. And I was going to be the reason that he got himself into a high level medical journal and he was going to become this great doctor. Not that he wasn't already a good doctor. I'm not going to throw him in that far into the bus, but I will say that if some doctor figured out how to prevent or cure sarcoidosis, that'd be a pretty big feather in the cap. And it just felt like this guy was using me. And I felt really, really uncomfortable with him to the point where, like, not even just the weird lung biopsy, but it just felt like he wanted to put me inside of a hamster cage and use me as a guinea pig. It just felt like that's what he was doing because he started throwing different drugs, ideas at me in ways that maybe that the treatment options could be different. And I tell you, I started to tell Dr. Booth about that, and he said, we'll see how it goes. As long as it stays away, because it seems like you're getting stronger, you're getting better, which I was. I said I went back to work in June. I did some work a few weeks. I felt good for the first couple days, and then it happened. It was like maybe a week and a half into June. The sluggishness came back. The fatigue came back. Remember how I told you I had gotten myself to where I was doing 20 sit-ups a day? I fell back down to 4. My energy was gone again. There was no vomiting or nose bleeding. That stuff was done, but the fatigue just hit me like Mike Tyson in the jaw. Like it's just like the one day I wake up and I'm feeling better, and then I get up the next day and I'm just still laying in bed waiting to get up an extra 45 minutes, an hour before I physically get out of the bed. And I'm like, oh, something ain't right. Something ain't right. Now, again, it seems like three of my best advocates during this time were my coworkers who were at the same level of management that I was. Joan, um, Steve T, and Ann. They worked with me a lot more. They saw me more, and we had those management meetings in between to tell what was going to happen, what happened in the shift before, and they could tell that I was not doing good again. Now, at this point, Anne specifically, she was really concerned because she was like, well, the situation had come up where her situation at home was changing, and she was about to move back to Florida within a few weeks. And she was concerned that when she left, that I would have to pick up a lot of the slack that she was going to be leaving because instead of having four of us there, it was going to be three of us. When I told her, well, think of it like this: the whole month of May when I was out, it was three anyway, and the three of you had to do what you had to do. And I was starting to notice that I was getting worse. And at that point, I told her, don't even worry about it. I'll never forget that conversation. It was like the last physical time that we were in the same area. And she was super concerned about how things were going to go. I told her, don't worry about it. Anne is a few years younger than me. And I specifically remember telling her, you don't have to worry. You've got your situation, which is already what it is. Now, me personally, I told her, I'm probably going to be out again. I could feel it because at this point, I was feeling the fatigue was hitting me a lot worse than it had previously hit me. So, in my mind, it was just a matter of time before I was going to be out again. And sure enough, it was third week of June. I was just gasping for energy and I couldn't get any. When I went to see my doctor, because like I said, I'd been seeing him every 2 weeks, and I had seen him the first week before I went back to work, and I'd skipped that week. And then it was the third week in June. I go to see him, and he looks at me as I'm just barely able to walk into his office because I'm just not doing good. And he tells me, "Okay, this is what we're gonna do. We're gonna put you out of work again. We're gonna set you up for some disability because this thing is attacking you pretty good." Now, I'm not gonna tell you that I remember his words word for word, but I can tell you this. He at this point said, I see that you're uncomfortable with seeing Dr. Kaiser. I can recommend that you go to the University of Penn in Pennsylvania, in Philadelphia. They have a whole pulmonary team, and one of the specific diseases that they um, help work for people are sarcoidosis. They're really, really, really good at treating it and maintaining it. There's no doubt about it that you definitely have it and it's attacking you yet again and it's getting you pretty bad. Dr. Booth then said, I'm going to set you up with a call and we're going to work around it and we're going to get you an appointment at the University of Penn to see one of their pulmonary specialists there who treat sarcoidosis on the daily. Now, one of the things he did at this point, he was like, I know that you were already on a whole bunch of stuff because he'd give me blood pressure medication because my blood pressure was a little high. Still just a little high. It's not over the top, but just a little bit. And that's what they did. He told me to take a whole bunch of other supplements in order to go along with the prednisone that I was taking, which I should have probably explained a little bit more. It's really crazy. Prednisone is nasty, nasty stuff. And the biggest problem that comes with it is the side effects. And he gave me preventative medicine for the side effects. One thing he said is it can have an effect on your bone density. So he prescribed the Oscal, an oyster calcium supplement that was able to replenish my bones and keep them strong. Another thing that he made sure that I had was he said that I should definitely take a multivitamin because you just probably should take a multivitamin. And he said, yeah, it definitely assists with some of your energy loss you might be feeling from the sarcoidosis, and the prednisone might hit you with a little bit of that too. So I started taking a multivitamin. And then the coolest and weirdest thing that he prescribed for me, but it was he was gonna give me the I can't remember what it was called, the Nexium, the purple pill. But then he said, well, that's a really strong antacid. And one of the things that prednisone can do is it can give you um, acid reflux. So what he's prescribed to me was to take some sort of, I think it was Pepsin. Specifically, he just told me to go get some Pepsin. So I would take Pepsin as part of that regimen. Then during this time, I'd take all that stuff and the prednisone, and I was waiting for an appointment to go to the University of Penn, and that's kind of how my June went, except for one little incident that was kind of crazy. Um, let's see. We have some time to tell a couple of these stories, some June stories outside of going to the doctor. Yeah, we do. We have some time. Um, I told you that Anne had left by the time I was out. She had gone, and that is the end of June. She was gone. Um, I then still would just pretty much sat at home for the first couple weeks of July because I was just exhausted. I was beat. I was tired, and I was ready to go, as they say. Not die, but I just didn't have any energy, and I didn't want to do anything. And of course, the perfect thing happened. As I was there, I decided to go and see Steve T because if you remember, I told you that he not only was a customer service leader like I was at Wawa, he also worked at what were training centers where they would go and they would have classes for management and new hires. He was the site manager for the training center in the Wawa in Lakehurst that I worked at. So he would go and he would work there from, I don't know, 3 to 11 before he went to the store and worked overnight. And so knowing that he was going to be there, I stopped over there a couple times. One night, he was finishing up some paperwork. I sat there. I talked to him for probably an hour and a half. And he's like, "Yeah, it's being sick is terrible. What you should do is you should just sort of not let yourself get totally down by it. I know you don't feel great, but it helps to do stuff, even though you don't feel great." And Steve T's advice was very simple because one of the things that he had known, and I made it well known for most of the people who were there, is that I was given a season pass to Great Adventure every year for a Christmas present for my Aunt Susan, who just recently passed away in December. And I had not wanted to go because I just didn't feel like I could. He said, "You know what? Even though you're sick, you're still young. Go." He literally said the words, "Go ride a roller coaster. Get some fresh air. Go to the beach. You like doing that." And I thought to myself, yeah, maybe. Just maybe it's not going to hurt. On top of doing my crunches, which of course, after getting a heavier dose of the prednisone, which is why I started getting all those other pills that I told you about, the Pepsid, the Oscal, taking the multivitamins. I then utilized my season pass and I went to Great Adventure. Not as often as I would have, which would have been twice a week. I would go once a week, and I would limit myself the first time to 3 rides. If I felt like I was okay after 3 rides, I would not tempt fate, and I would go back home. And I did that until, yes, August. Yeah, I did that till August. But one of the things that I was doing during that period of time was I had heard that Muscle and Fitness was a good book as far as exercise workout regimens, and I had been doing those crunches. And I said, I want to try and see if there's other types of crunches that I can do. And so I got my hands on a Muscle and Fitness. I read it. I looked at it real carefully, and I said to myself, you know what? I think that there's room for me to use other types of crunches. And I started doing a whole bunch of different kinds of crunches. Now, this is June, and I had just started getting back into the crunches, and I just was realizing that it wasn't even necessarily all physical. There was a lot of it that was physical. My energy level was like zero from time to time. There would be days when I had no gas in the tank, and those were the hard ones. What I would do is I would count my day as a good day if I had energy for a certain period of time. If there was a point when I felt like I could do the crunches on my own regiment, which I started after I knew that I was going to be out for an indefinite period of time, I just went all in. And I said, okay, when I get up in the morning, before I eat breakfast, I'm going to do as many crunches as I can. Before I eat lunch, I'm going to do as many crunches as I can. Excuse me. Before I eat dinner, I'm going to do as many crunches as I can. And before I go to bed, I'm going to do as many crunches. In that first week, I had like Green Lantern like will to the point where I wasn't going to let anything stop me from doing this. No matter how exhausted I was, I said to myself, the more tired I am, I'm going to push myself even harder on those days. Some of it's crazy, but it's what got me through a lot of times. That mental barrier. And my goodness, 10 crunches went to 50, 50 went to 100. Now, this is over the course of between June and we'll just call it the end of December. I started doing to a point where I became madly obsessed with doing these crunches. And then I got to a point where I realized I was doing 250 to 300 crunches in a set before breakfast, before lunch, before dinner, before I went to bed on a good day. On a bad day, well, I might have done 100 all day. The worst days, I would just fight and fight and fight and get about 300 for the whole day. But then I came up with almost a mantra, a saying that I would say to myself over and over and over and over again when I was doing the crunches. It would be in my mind. Sometimes I would actually spit the words out of my mouth, but it would always be in my head, and I would think about it while I was doing these crunches. And then after a point in July, I would get to a point where I said during lunch, I would do a couple hundred crunches and I'd take a walk. There's going to be a story about a walk. I'll tell that a little bit later. Probably not going to happen this episode by looking at the clock, but for certain, I'm going to tell you that story. But this is probably a really good place to get ready to end here because when I was attacking those crunches, and I mean attacking them, my mind went to a place where I knew that in order for me to maintain my energy level and my mindset, I knew that I couldn't stop because stopping is when I knew that the energy drain was going to be in effect. And so I kept repeating over and over and over and over to myself. The one saying that if I was going to get a tattoo all the time, as I'm speaking to you right now, I'm just talking this out loud, the thing that I would probably put on my body is this saying. That was just helped me get through those crunches and helped me get through a lot of things mentally whenever it got tough. That saying was, I will not stop. I will never stop. And I would repeat it in my mind, or I'd speak the words, I will not stop. I will never stop. And I just kept saying in my mind, out loud, I will not stop. I will never stop. To the point where in 2004, 2005, I was doing stupid numbers of crunches because I didn't break that regimen. I just kept doing it. This is years in advance after being sick. I would then go and I would do 400 or 500 crunches after I got up, before breakfast. 400 or 500 crunches, lunch. Dinner, if I was working, I wouldn't do it, obviously. But if I was home, I would do them before then. And then before I went to bed, I'd do 400 or 500 crunches. So on a day off, I could easily do somewhere between low end if I did only 400 crunches 1,600 to 2,000 punches a day. That's just what I did. But I would never get to the point when once I got around 200, 300, I don't know, more like 300, 350, my mind would always go to, I will not stop. I will never stop. Just like the walks. When I started taking them during lunch, I'd be so tired sometimes. But I just knew that I couldn't stop because I knew as soon as I did, I don't know if it's going to get worse. And like I said, I counted days as good or bad based on how much physical energy that I had during the day. And when I was out, the average week, 7 days, not really skipping ahead because I still have more story to tell. And that means at least one more episode because I didn't tell you about my doctor at University of Penn, which I plan to, and a couple little adventures that happened around the area of July, which is probably mostly where I'm going to focus. But a good week, I would have 4 bad days. That'd be a good week. 4 bad days. Bad week would be like 6. And there would be some weeks in July and in August and a couple in September. Just every day, no matter how much I wanted it, there would be just no gas in the tank. But I will not stop. I will never stop. I just kept going. And it was horrible. I made it through. As the fact that I'm talking to you right now. But that was my assessment. If I had a good day, I would have a lot of energy. Bad day, no energy. Good week, 4 bad days. If I could get through 3 days that were good, that was a good week. If I had more than 4 days that were not so good, bad week. So I played the baseball percentages, 3 out of 10, and you're a Hall of Famer. So I said 3 good days. Hey, it's a good thing. If it swung the other way, I wouldn't be happy about the week. It wouldn't be the best of weeks if I had 4 days. If I had more than 4 bad days. But I think it's about time to ring the bell, and I'm gonna have to pick this up in earnest next week, I believe. Yeah, next week. I still have more to talk about, and that means I'm gonna pick this thing up in the month of July because really June. That's really what happened. I just went to the doctors a whole bunch of times, and then I wouldn't stop. I would never stop. And July has some more fun stories in it. One in particular. No, that one was that in July? Yeah, that was in July. And I'm going to go to that one too. It was my favorite story. One of my favorite stories this whole time. It's a lot of fun. But as for right now, I'm going to ring the bell, and that's going to end the main event. And now it's time for one of my favorite segments, as you all know by now, the Spear of the Week. I know I spoke about Dr. Kaiser as being the Spear of the Week a couple weeks ago. And just based on the stuff that happened in June, he has yet again from the Spear of the Week. The simple fact that in my mind, like I said, in my mind, I don't know what was going through his head. I don't know. But it just felt to me like the man was trying to write a book and I was going to be the subject of his book. And I didn't want any part of it. And instead of giving him an actual spear, I just let Dr. Um, Boone refer me to what I would consider a better treatment option at the University of Penn that I will get into in the next coming weeks. Hopefully, in fact, I should get to it next week. At least touch on it next week. For sure. Spear of the week, though, it's Dr. Kaiser. Definitely is. Now, let's see about those questions. Let's flip through here a couple times and see what we got. What kind of question? And let's see. Hmm. Hmm. Ah, speaking of one that's now definitely near and dear to my heart, I most recently, as of today, it's well, not anymore. It's actually May 18th, midnight. Well, actually, not even midnight, but cool number 1221. 1221. I'm a week removed from doing a very fun thing. And the question is, do you think artists should censor? Let's start over again. So they can't even read. Do you think artists should censor their work so they don't offend anyone? Do I think artists should censor their work so they don't offend anyone? Well, like I said, I'm a week removed from doing my very first art show where I sold my very first piece of art. I believe that artists should be free to express whatever it is that they're trying to express. It goes all the way down to freedom of speech. And I do believe that someone's art is a part of their speech. One of my favorite movies, The Da Vinci Code, said it best. Um, a picture speaks 1,000 words, but which words? Coolest part about that line was as soon as Tom Hanks said it when I was sitting in the theater, I knew he was going to say which words at the end of it. I believe that every painting or picture or poem or book or play or movie or song expresses what the artist is feeling. Sometimes it's a feeling that people agree with. Sometimes it's a feeling that people do not agree with. I believe in wholeheartedly the concept of if you see something on TV you don't like, you can have the remote and you can turn the channel. I believe that if you are listening to, well, a podcast and you don't like what the host says, you can stop listening to that podcast. You have the freedom to decide to listen to it if you want to or not. You have the freedom to look at a piece of art for what it is as the artist puts it out there. I don't think that under any circumstances that anyone who's making any type of art should censor their work necessarily because it offends somebody else. Because, good Lord, let's face it, if everybody stopped doing things because it offended someone else, there are a great many a book, a great many a show, a great many of work of art of all types, paint or sculpture, that wouldn't exist. And I think that would be worse than anything. Just because it offends one person doesn't mean somebody else might say, hey, that's the greatest thing I've ever seen. Should we stop everything just because one person's offended by it? I'm sorry, I've never been a politically correct individual. Now, granted, there are some things that I strongly believe in, and there are some things that I think are ridiculous. Let's face it, the stuff that I find to be in between is generally what I talk. I don't always go on the things that I'm really gung ho about, or as much as I get bothered by certain things, it's not even the stuff that I hate the most. I like to keep it in the middle. I don't like to go far out in either direction because then it seems like it's a grab, right? But truthfully, censoring artists, that's terrible. I mean, it is from graffiti on the side of a building to what some consider a masterpiece worth millions in a giant museum. Let the expression come out. If you don't like it, you don't have to look at it. So my answer to the question, do I think artists should be censored, should censor their work so they don't offend others? No. I, in fact, think that some artists should create work because it's their passion to offend others. I think that there are people who should who have the ability to create things specifically to offend people because sometimes when you offend people with your art, they talk about your art. And when they're talking about your art, it makes people discuss things. And when they discuss things, maybe that was the idea to begin with. Create a dialogue. Maybe that's why they did it. Just a thought. Just a thought. Okay. It's now time to get to the end of this show here. I'm on Instagram, 5102, Philip Henderson 5102. Join us on the Facebook group. There's always room for one more. You can check the archives of the Lip out. They end sometime in July of 2024, and they expand all the way through till May of 2021. So there's plenty of content that you didn't hear here on YouTube that is still on Spotify. Go check it out. Of course, this channel at Fill the Lip, where you can find all the newest stuff, the current projects that are going on right now. I think that I like, speaking of current projects, the painting that is the background for today's episode happens to be not just a new one, but as of 12:30 a.m. May 18th, I actually created this on Friday, which would have been May 16th. So this is new as you hear this episode. New. I call it Meshed Up Peace. Well, this particular painting, as all of mine, are one of one, and it will be on sale, but not yet. I'm not sure. I think it might actually need a little bit more tweaking to it. But as it stands, I like it. And it should be on sale by September. But the idea behind it is many different things can be combined to make peace. As you can see, the peace sign is made up of 5, 6 different colors. Get it? But now it's time for me to give you the words of wisdom before I go to bed. I'm not even gonna lie about it. That's my next stop. And the words of wisdom are the same ones until I finish this whole story of 2002, 2003. Once again, I know you're getting bored, but don't worry. I've been making more words of wisdom as well as preparing for other shows. So there's gonna be more good ones coming. Don't worry. But the words of wisdom are everyone has a story. Tell it. You never know who needs to hear it. And on that note, the only thing I personally need to hear is the sound of myself snoring. My name is Phil, and you've just listened to The Lip.